do know that my experience of being in this world has been really very much changed by the teachings. And my guides have a very simple teaching, which I like. And this one I'm really good with. I really work with this one. They say, the action of fear is to create more fear. And that every choice you make because you're frightened calls more fear to you. And they say, look at your life, look at every choice you ever made because you were afraid, and see what it got you. It's probably more fear. And the guides say, we don't write self-help books. And what they say sort of about this, or has been said, I don't remember how it came out, but self-help books are for the small self that want to improve. The divine self is great. So it's about learning to be as the divine self. And you don't do that through an act of will. You do that through alignment and engagement.
You're listening to KAren Swain, teacher of Deliberate Creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
Hi, how are you? You're with KAren, accentuating the positive, bringing you another enlightened conversation. I'm so excited to have Paul Selig on the show with me today. I'm loving Paul Selig. He is a channel, and he channels from his broader perspective, and he's got incredible wisdom to share with all of us here down on this fabulous human experience. Let me tell you a little bit about Paul. He was born in New York City and received his master's degree from Yale. He had a spiritual experience in 1987 that left him clairvoyant. As a way to gain a context for what he was beginning to experience, he studied a form of energy healing working at Marianne Williamson's Manhattan Center for Living and in private practice. In the process, he began to hear for his clients, and much of Paul's work now is as a clairvoyant, clairaudient, and a channel and empath. Paul has led channel energy groups for many years, and in 2009 he was invited to channel at the Esalen Institute's Superpower Symposium, where he was filmed for the upcoming documentary Authors of the Impossible. He is a subject of a short documentary film, Paul and the Word, and is featured on an A&E biography channel series, The Unexplained, which premiered in August 2012. So excited to have you on the show, Paul. Thanks so much for joining us here in Australia on Accentuate the Positive.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about your guides. I've been reading your book, The Book of Knowing and Worth. And although I want to talk about your story and how this all happened, I really want to explore the Book of Knowing and Worth because it means a lot to me, because I'm struggling with that myself. Worthiness has been for me a bit of a pattern, I guess, throughout my life, and I think that is for a lot of people. Really knowing our worth. I thought at this ripe old age that I was pretty worthy, but I still have issues coming up. And reading the book, I feel like the book is an exercise in affirmation of. When you read it, you've got so many affirmations that just, you repeat yourself over and over again. It's an exercise in really sort of establishing your worth. I'm loving it. In 1987, something extraordinary happened to you, which left you clairvoyant. What happened?
I don't even know what happened anymore. I can tell you the story as I understand it and as I remember it. I was very recently on a spiritual path. I had grown up and been raised pretty much an atheist, so I had the beginnings of an inkling that there was a God through some things that had happened. And there was this thing happening in 87 that people were calling the harmonic convergence. And somebody said, well, people are going to be waking up. And I just decided I was going to ask to be woken up because, if there was a God or something out there, and I suddenly was believing there was, after a lifetime of not, it occurred to me that perhaps you could just ask to be woken up and that would be fine. So I went up to the roof and I asked, and I ended up having an experience. And I always say, for all I know, I may well have been hyperventilating But it was an experience of energy moving up through my body. It was a very physical experience. And I then began seeing little lights around people very shortly thereafter. And that was the beginning of what I now suspect or can call clairvoyance, although my primary abilities really was a clairaudient and a clairsentient. But, I was seeing little lights, and I'd never seen little lights before. And that really did sort of provoke me to stay on a path, I think, and give me some kind of evidence that there was more to the world than I had been led to believe thus far.
It's interesting that you say you asked, because I believe, I've got a mob that I call Blissful Beings that I talk to. I used to call them my common sense. It was unlike your sort of experience. Mine was a gradual coming to understand, just like coming to understand that we all have this, and we can develop it. And they say to me that anything that we experience in life, we actually ask for. We ask for through our asking, or we ask for through our vibration. I was speaking to someone the other day who's bringing through a frequency, a healing frequency, and I said, "You asked for it." And she said, "Well, I asked to know what my purpose was." So it's not like you ask specifically for what you get, but you ask, and it comes in ways that delights you, really. Did it delight you when you started seeing lights around people?
It gave me something that I think I needed very badly at that time in my life. It gave me something experiential, as did the energy, as did sort of the opening to clairaudience. I had heard some stuff and that I had followed, and it was the very beginning back in '87. But I also developed over many years, truthfully. Did it delight me? Yes, it did. It encouraged me, and it gave me something to hold on to, because I was moving into very uncharted territory in my life. I was raised without this stuff. I had a master's degree from Yale. This was not what I expected to be doing with my time or my life, but it felt essential at that moment. So the lights were encouraging, and I still see them, and I still don't know what they are half the time. They're beautiful when they show.
This is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because it's so exciting when you meet someone that has a similar experience to you. And when I saw you talking about the lights, I was like, oh, he sees the lights too, because I see the lights. Like I've interviewed a lot of clairvoyants who see people sitting on couches, they sit, and I'm like, you actually see them like physically with your eyes? And they say yes. And I say, are they see-through? And they go, yes. And I'm thinking, I don't experience that. But what I experience is lights around people all the time. I see, and they're different colors, and I know that they're spirit or energy or spirit. I'm never quite sure exactly who they are, but they're different colors. Predominantly turquoise blue is the light I see a lot. Do you know exactly who they are or what?
No, I don't. There's different things when I'm reading somebody, and a light goes off over their head, I know that I just know that they have had a thought that I need to inquire about. Okay. I'm also a college teacher. I've taught at a university for 25 years or more now. And when my students were sitting there, occasionally a light would go off over their head, and I would call on them. I said, "What were you thinking?" And they say, "How did you know?" But, it was like the idea light bulb. I've done workshops where blue lights have gone off over crown chakras right and left, like flash bulbs going off. It's astonishing to see.
Yeah.
And other times, these orbs show up in the room that are really sort of large and beautifully colored. And I always perceived those to be, very different sort of consciousness and guides and high-level consciousness. What I'm seeing flashing around people, I think, are possibly very different things. Sometimes I think they're the living just peeking in on an energetic level. So that's my experience with them.
Have you asked your guides?
I asked them at the time. It's funny, when I'm reading, I'm very present with the information, and the moment I'm not reading, I don't know what the hell I was talking about. It's been the case. I channel these books I sit there, I close my eyes, and the books are dictated. They're not even edited. They're published, really just the transcript, the typed transcripts of the verbal dictation. But I often say I'm not the best student of the work, and I don't consider myself an expert on this, I don't know how one gets to be an expert on this. I don't know. I think I'm always going to be a student. I'm fascinated by it. I'd love to understand more. But yeah, in the moment, I will ask what the light may be, usually for a client, and I'll get information for them, the specific.
So many teachers say that, and I'm right there. So many teachers that bring through absolutely exalted wisdom say exactly the same. I'm no expert. I'm just human. I'm fallible. I have my ego. I have my doubts. I'm still learning. And I think that's just the perfection of the human condition, that those doubts and that you wouldn't want to be an expert, because then the ride of physical life wouldn't be as exciting. It wouldn't be as adventurous. Bringing through the wisdom so that other people can benefit, including yourself, is kind of like a service, I suppose. But being human with our doubts and our fears and is the joy of the ride, really.
I think it's part of it. I suspect what my guides would say.
Yes.
Who is doubting? I think that's what they would say. Which aspect of you is doubting? And they would say that that's the small self, and that the divine self, which is really their teaching, or the true self, actually knows. Yes. And their teaching has been very much about moving us to that place of knowing. I think on an egoic level, I'm wary of experts. I mean, frankly, I don't know how to fix a car. I would go to an expert in fixing cars. I want somebody who has that level of expertise. But I think in this work, which for me unfolds, I think that I'm always going to be, if I'm lucky, somewhat astonished by it, because it's phenomena. It happens. And when I'm in the phenomena of it, and when I work, as a channel, there's an enormous amount of energy that comes into the room and works on everybody in ways that we can all feel. And the books, the guides say, are energetic transmissions that work on the reader. So I love this stuff. How does it happen? I think one day science may have answers, but up until then, I'm here doing my best to stay open to the experience and not let the small self or the ego sort of shut me down. The questions, I think, are healthy still. It doesn't mean that I deny the work. It means that I'm the first one to say, I don't really know how it happens. I just know that it happens.
Beautiful. So I'd love to discuss the book, your latest book, The Book of Knowing and Worth. I think, as you say, that all the books are worth reading because they're all an energetic transmission. So they're working as the reader is reading the book, they're working on our consciousness. They're allowing us to maybe not give as much power to the egoic self, the one that doubts, the one that worries, the one that questions. And what I love about your work, do you have a name for your guides? Do you call them anything, or you just call them?
Usually I'm comfortable calling them the guides. Occasionally they come through with names, and the new book, which will be out in January, they do. But the guides is what I've been calling them, because my ex used to say, ask the guides this, ask the guides that. That's how they got the name the guides. Not any other reason, but it was convenient. And it's a comfortable name, for easy conversation.
But what I love about what they say is every time I've seen you talk and when I read your book, it's as you choose, you create, you choose, you choose, you choose. And it's always about choice. It's like completely empowering, that nothing is happening to us. We are choosing in every moment. Every thought is a choice. Every thought is a decision, and we're choosing. Like when I hear you speak and when I hear you channel, for me, that's what comes through. You choose, you choose. We are, in fact, choosing how we live our lives and how people respond to us in every breath, every thought, every identified summation. Like I am, I'm not, I can, I can't, I won't, I would never. All of those are choice. How do we start to live more in alignment with knowing our worth? Because the book is it's like knowing your worth. That we have,
I think it goes back again to the who we self-identify as. Now, if I want to continue to self-identify through my personality self, I'm Paul, I'm of this age, these are all the things that are wrong with me or right with me. And my guides would call this the frame, or one of the frames that we hold. And the guides say, we all carry these frames of personality. And they say that the purpose of the frame is to fill itself, and this is their gesture for that, with what we expect to be there. So if I claim myself as lonely, I am calling loneliness to me. I am in accord with it. Now, you use the word choice. My guides often use it, but they also use the word agreement. And agreement, I actually feel better about, because, I'm not choosing. I don't believe that I'm choosing to be single or choosing to be angry at so-and-so, but I may well be in agreement with those things, which means I'm in accordance with them. I'm in energetic alignment and accordance, and consequently, I'm claiming through that belief. It may not be a conscious choice at all. It may well be a kind of programming from personal history, societal history, whatever the crap is we carry with us that my guides would say is not who we are. So the simple answer is, who is worthy? Who is the aspect of the self that is worthy? Now, the guides teach the divine self. They call it a number of different names, but the divine self, or the true self, sometimes they'll use the word Christed self, and their definition of that is that the Christ is the aspect of the Creator that can be manifested in physical form. And they say that that's who everybody is, an aspect of the Creator. So the alignment to the identity as an aspect of the Creator manifested in form makes you worthy. Why wouldn't you be? When my guides teach workshops, they'll often say things in exercises to people like, you were born, you have a right to be here. You have the ticket to be here. You were born. You don't have to earn your place on this planet. You have a right to be here. Now, most of us have been told we don't in one way or another. Mm-hmm. And the true self, or the divine self, that they're asking us to align as and with and to, which they say wants to be expressed as and through us, calls to us those things that are in accord with it. So the true self calls into manifestation those things that will support its own realization. And my guides say this is all school. You know what I mean? That's what it is.
So I'm just here. You're in New York, aren't you?
I'm in New York City, and this is actually, the sirens may continue. It's the nature of the place. I'm on the 12th floor, so you're hearing this from...
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Well, here's what I get. The urgency of this information for anyone that's watching this, those sirens, they pay attention. They're getting people's attention. Yeah. So, worth, knowing our worth. This book, is so very much about claiming our worth and living knowing who we really are as someone who brings through this knowledge. How do you live the principles yourself? How does it look to fully know your true worth for you?
Well, you're assuming that I do, and I don't say that I do. I wish I did, and it's a challenge for me some days to continue to show up for this work and be the radio for it. But in a lot of ways, I think it's important. While I can explain the teachings as I understand them, I'm not the teacher. And the guides are the teachers. So in many ways, it's like asking the radio itself is not the song it's playing. It's the conduit. And when I'm channeling, really, it's like asking the radio to judge the broadcast or the faucet to judge the water. How does it feel to live these teachings? When I'm channeling and I am operating as the guides because they're coming through in a very, very direct way, it feels fairly extraordinary because there's no fear. And there is deep compassion and deep love. When I'm walking down the street and I'm angry at myself for having gained 20 pounds that I didn't need to gain, and thinking about the conversation I wish I had had, I'm operating really from my small self and as my small self. And as I do that, I actually incur what it's in accord with, which is, the energy of self-deprecation or frustration or all those things. The interesting thing is I do have access to these tools. The guides are very, very big on them. And when I work with them, they're in great support of my shifting my thinking or my energetic transmission. My guides say that, our transmission is our consciousness. That's what it is. That's our broadcast. That's how we're broadcasting. So the living of this, it's interesting. I'm watching people because I'm on the road a lot now, just channeling, and this is the last thing I ever thought I would be doing. I'll be completely honest with you. This isn't what I thought I had signed on for. I was fascinated with the work, but I was channeling in my living room for a small group of people for probably close to 20 years.
Wow.
I began in my early 30s. And not even thinking it was channeling. I just wanted to do energy work with people because I was working with this very beautiful energy in those days. And it wasn't until the first book was published that I was outed. I had a website for a few years, maybe 2 years before that, without my name on it, because I didn't want anybody to find me. I was using it for clients who, I have clients, I'm a very good empath, so I have this very odd ability to step into people. So if you want to know what's going on with your sister, I can step into your sister. I'll often start to resemble her, and I'll be able to hear all the parts. I guess it's a form of physical mediumship. But I was seeing clients who wanted to talk to the guides and wanted me to tune in to the people in their lives or their business. But you would only get there really if you had a referral. I was using it to take payment. I didn't want people to know. I was a university professor, or teacher, and I just assumed that I wasn't allowed to be public. And now it's been done for me. The books have done it. And now I'm on the road a lot, and I'm being in this work. And I'm really highly aware at this moment in my life, and I'll be completely honest with you, of where I don't feel that my life is in accord with the teachings.
Yes.
And these tend to be the places where I'm still in fear, have an investment in being who I thought I was. Yeah. There's a new book, it'll be out in January, from Tarcher Penguin, called The Book of Mastery. And when the guides began that book, in the introduction, they said to me, you don't get to just be the channel anymore. You're going to really do the work this time.
Sorry.
That book, it's true, but it kicked my butt. I'll tell you, it hasn't stopped. They said the integration for me would be about 6 months. And I think we're looking at the end of the summer for some integration. So I'm still in process, and I'm not expecting to announce at the end of August that I have arrived to some enlightened state. But I do know that my experience of being in this world has been really very much changed by the teachings. I do know that my experience of being in this world has been really very much changed by the teachings. I was a skeptic, and in some ways I was a skeptic, and in some ways I am still. And I was somebody that didn't necessarily really even believe in channeling. I'd seen some people do it, and I thought that they were probably deluded. This was when I was very young. I was judgmental about it, and occasionally I see somebody will send me a clip on YouTube, and I always look for what I find familiar about the experience. But, I'm not a very graceful channel. And if anybody's seen me work, I whisper the words, I repeat them. There's an accent. It's coming sometimes a mile a minute. Sometimes it's shouty. Sometimes it feels too slow. And all I'm doing is keeping up the dictation. Being a channel, in my opinion, and truthfully being a good channel, is really about being the radio. Or in my case, taking dictation.
The translator.
Yeah, very much.
Look, as you're speaking my life. It's so funny, because when I was in my 20s, I went to see this woman channeling. Not to say that what was coming through was not worth listening to, but I was not listening to it because I was so skeptical, because she was putting on the whole persona. She was putting on an accent. She was saying that she was some person from another planet or something. And as a young girl, I'm looking at her sort of quizzically thinking, what the hell is going on? Not listening to a word she said, but thinking, where is she? And I've got to say my BS meter was off the Richter scale, because the theater of the experience was so huge that I couldn't hear the message because the theater was too distracting. And
I understand.
When I started bringing through their messages, it was very without any theater. It's exactly in my voice. It's exactly in my personality. And it doesn't actually sound like I've shifted to any higher consciousness. It's just a continuation of me blabbing. But I know I've shifted because I don't know the stuff that I'm saying, and then after I finish saying it, I go, wow, that was so cool.
Yeah.
But there's a very smooth transition from me to them, from me to them, from me to them. So it's so interesting, the theater of bringing through, the message.
It's a good way to put it. My guide, I find, to be somewhat theatrical in presentation.
Yeah.
It didn't used to be that way, and I've seen old a video of me when I first began channeling publicly. And, I was actually I was rocking back and forth in the chair and muttering and repeating. And it looked completely crazy. And I knew that. It was unfortunate, but that's how it was coming through me. The books didn't come through with an accent until halfway through towards the beginning of the second book, it began to appear. And I actually went through a process initially of being very uncomfortable with it. But I realized that when what I would call the guide with the accent came through, I was actually trusting the transmission much more because it felt so other from me. It felt so distinctly different.
Okay.
And that allowed me to really do my job, which was to, I say I'm in the back seat of the car, letting somebody else drive through this thing. And I've had to come to terms with some of this because I do workshops sometimes, and occasionally somebody will be there who just got dragged there, and I'll see their face, which is like, huh? What the hell is this guy doing? And I just can't care anymore. I really, really can't. My job, like it or not, is to show up for this work regardless of how I feel. And even on the days when I'm questioning it all, there's a wonderful quote by Helen Schuckman, who's the woman who channeled A Course in Miracles, which I've actually never read. I started it when I was in my 30s and thought it was beautiful, but I just wasn't comprehending it, and it was very dense for me at the time. But there's a quote that I love about the work, and she said, I don't believe it, but I know it's true. Yeah. And I so get that. That's exactly what it feels like. I mean, it's not how we're raised. We're not raised to believe that we can sort of work, that our consciousness can merge with something else. I mean, I was a playwright, so the idea of the imagination coming through and the idea of seeing things in your head and then rendering them and the idea of letting a character become you as you're writing them all made perfect sense. But what I didn't know until an interviewer asked me a number of years ago, because I thought that there was no connection, I was actually putting myself in a light trance before I ever wrote. I would put on a piece of music on loop, and it would play for hours. And I was just receding and letting stuff come through me. It wasn't until I was doing a reading for somebody, and I think this was how it happened. I mean, it's things like it had happened, but it was very specific. Some woman asked about her father, and for some reason, I think I asked for his whole name, and I had my eyes closed, and the woman gasped because her father had been pretty horrible to her and was no longer living. And I opened my eyes and said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Oh my God, you look just like him."
Wow.
And I had somatized the guy. I just took on his posture and facial expressions and attitude. And that's when I began to realize whatever's going on is happening really, in some kind of interesting way. But it sure goes to show you that consciousness isn't localized in the physical body. Yeah. It's much, much greater than the mechanism that we're fortunate enough to be here with.
Well, it's kind of like you try on their energy suit, like you put on their energy cardigan, and I don't know, people can explore that. You could try on, maybe there's someone you revere, a spiritual teacher or a playwright or an actor or anybody that you revere. There's some qualities about their personality that you would like. You could literally do what you do and, ask to sort of pretend to be them, like.
Well, but that's not it. You see, let me explain, because it's an interesting thing, because it's really not about pretending.
Well,
and it's not about imagining.
Okay. Tell me.
This is what it is.
Okay.
I operate as a radio. When I tune into somebody, I am literally tuning into the station or the broadcast that is them, and I'm aligning to it to let it play through me. That's really it. The idea of imagining concerns me because, I don't know half the people. I don't mostly when I read for people, I don't know anybody that I'm tuning into unless it happens to be I'm tuning. A friend says, "Can you tune into my boyfriend?" I don't know what's happening with us, and I may do that. But mostly what it is, it's about a kind of alignment. Yeah. And you have to first, but I'm going to agree that I do think anybody can do this.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that we haven't been taught that we can.
Yes.
We're much more sensitive than we know.
Yeah, I think that we do it all the time without really knowing it. Yeah, many times. Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I once did a workshop, I can't remember, a constellation workshop where there was a group of us put in the middle of the room, and someone had an issue, and then she named us. You're my mother, you're my father, a family constellation thing. I can't remember. And then nothing was said, and we just had to, like, okay, I'm your mother, and then just react to what we were feeling.
Uh-huh.
And I felt desperately ill. And like I was dying, and then I sort of acted like I was dying, and this poor girl who I didn't know burst into tears because her mother got sick and died. And to tell you the truth, Paul, that was one of the worst days I ever had. I never wanted to do that ever again because I physically felt this woman's pain, and I just thought that was not nice. I don't want to do that, never went back to one of those workshops again.
Oh, I don't, but what you were doing was what I do in practice.
Yeah.
And, I don't do a lot of work with people that have crossed over. I don't really I consider myself a spiritual channel, but not necessarily a spiritual medium. And I do, when people who've crossed come over, I often feel first how they cross, which is what you're doing. That's a way of signifying. So, if I am tuning into somebody who's crossed and I get a pain in my chest, I can assume it's a heart attack or a pulmonary issue. But, when I feel other people's pain, which I do, and sometimes it's physical, it's mostly emotional, psychic, I'm there only long enough to understand it. I can't carry it. It's not a good thing. It's not my pain to carry. And if I'm feeling it in order to be able to support somebody, I think, in understanding or moving it. And so it's a useful thing. It's a useful thing. But, when it first started, my experience was like yours because I didn't know. I trained as a hands-on energy healer when I was in my 30s, but nobody explained to me about clairsentience. Yeah. So I was volunteering at this place that was providing services for people with life-challenging illness because they asked me to come and volunteer, so I did it. And I found that I was taking on people's symptoms before they walked into the room.
Me too.
And, some of it's fun, but I got to feel other things. I'm the only guy, and I say this sometimes, I'm the only guy that I know that knows what it feels like to have a hot flash. I'm sure there are people that have. I felt, pregnancy is just
You've given birth.
I have given birth once. I did the reading. I was reading a midwife, and it was a bad pregnancy. It was the child didn't make it, and I actually was going into the whole scenario where I was becoming the mother and the midwife, and I was trying to help somebody understand. But it's it's a fascinating thing, and it's an amazing gift to be able to feel that stuff. But I only realized what I was doing really through some trial and error. And when I teach workshops, my guides teach people how to do it pretty frequently. And and people are really good. Again, these are things that we have access to.
Absolutely.
But we've been told no, so we don't do it. There's a woman, I like this story only because I was teaching at the Esalen Institute, which is this wonderful place in California. And there was a woman who transferred into my workshop because she didn't like her yoga teacher or something. And she didn't know what she was getting into. She wasn't there for the first night. But my guides taught tracking, and sort of how to tune into the field and pick up information. And she was working with a partner, and she was working with this really lovely guy, and she said, there's something here that's not supposed to be here. And the guy opened up his shirt, and he had a medical port under the skin. So she was feeling the blockage, and that kind of thing, you don't know that you can do it until you do it. And then once you can do it, it gets sort of built in. It's like if you never try to touch your tongue to your nose, you don't know if it's possible. But the moment you can, it becomes a skill or an ability that you can work with. And I think a lot of this stuff is like that. And I think we're all much more gifted than we've been taught that we were.
Look, it's fascinating, and I think that, the exploration of our energetic, what's possible is just so thrilling and exciting. And I want to see universities teaching this. I want to see it taught in every school, I want to see this understanding expand. I think it's important. But in saying that, I've honed my skills in that area. Like in my 30s, I did so many energy healing. I mean, as you speak, you're just talking my life, and I'm just like sitting here going, But anyway, in saying that, I'm going to quiz you again because I'm going to ask you personally. I still want to know how it is that we can really embody this understanding of really owning our worth as infinite, intelligent, incredible beings. I mean, without the fear, without the doubt. For you, let's look at you, because I struggle with it. I see some people don't struggle with it, but I do. So I've honed my intuitive and psychic abilities, but I'm still struggling. Like, what do you do when you hit your doubt? How do you apply the knowledge?
Well, I mean, I when you were first talking, I was tempted to go to my guides because you were saying, how is this done?
Yeah.
And how they would describe that might be different than my personal process of this.
Okay.
When I hit the doubt, and every time, I'll be honest with you, every time I've taken a step forward in my work, I've mostly hit some doubt as I pass to the next level. That's just what it's been. When I first studied energy healing, I had so much fear, that somebody could be hurt. What is this? Is this okay? There were symbols you were using in the air, and I went, oh my God, that sounds witchy. I was making everything scary. And I was raised an atheist. I didn't have this, I had past life baggage that I know about now, but that wasn't my baggage. And I continued, and this is the one thing I give myself some credit for, I continued to show up in the face of not believing some days and not wanting to do it. And then, but I'm going to go to the guide. So how do we embody, was your question, in the face of doubt? Now, I should just say, for people who haven't seen me channel, when I channel, I whisper the words and I repeat them. It's not terribly graceful. It's just how it comes through. Takes a moment to get used to how you embody yourself. How you embody yourself as your true self. As your true self is the work of the text we write, is the work of the text that we write, very simply. And we will tell you very simply that anchoring the divine as you, anchoring the divine as you in your vibratory field, which is the claim of the word, which is the claim of the word, or the action of the creator as you, or the action of the creator as you, aligns you to your potential outside of what you have known, outside of what you have known. You cannot do this with personality. You cannot do this through personality as long as you're relying on personality. As long as you're relying on the personality to be your benefactor, to be your benefactor, you will stay in a prison. You will stay in a prison of the small self, the alignment to the divine self, the alignment to the divine self, the Christ itself as we teach it, the Christ itself as we teach, or the truth of who you are, or the truth of who you are, imprinted in your field. Imprinted in your field creates for you the progression you need, the progression you need to realign every aspect of your life, to realign every aspect of your life to the truth you are, to the truth of who you are. Most of you invest. But most of you invest great meaning in who you think you should be, in who you think you should be, how you've been named by others, how you have been named by others, how you claim yourself, how you claim yourself in egoic ways, yes. In egoic ways, yes, and the unattachment to these things. And the unattachment to these things in most cases is too fearful for you, You see the personality self. You see the personality self as the one who invests in fear, is the one who invests in fear. The divine self cannot be afraid. The divine self cannot be afraid. She knows who she is. She knows who she is. She does not align to fear. She does not align to fear because fear cannot exist. Because fear cannot exist at the level of creation, she said. At the level of creation, she lives at, period. And they're saying period. So that's the beginning of the answer. That's what I'm hearing. That's the beginning of the answer. But this is what they've been teaching. I mean, now it'll be 4 books. But it is this, and I'll be honest. I just started to get this teaching, and it took me 4 books to get it. I was doing I'll say this. I was doing a workshop in Toledo, Ohio, in the Midwest, and the guides were teaching this claim. They're not really affirmations; they're claims of truth. My guides say, and the one they were teaching is, "I know who I am. I know what I am. I know how I serve." Which means I know who I am as the aspect of the Creator, as my divine self. I know what I am in this incarnation. I know how I serve, which just means how you're expressed in your highest way. And this man burst out into tears. And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "I don't have to be afraid anymore. I get it. I don't have to be afraid." And I sat there thinking, I wish I got it, because that sounds great. I'm scared all the time. And I was scratching my head. And when I was channeling the new book, I really got it. Because I was going through as I said, the guide said, "You're going to go through the teachings." And I started to. And some stuff was happening. And the guide said, the divine self cannot be persecuted. It's not possible. The only self that can be persecuted is the ego. That's it. The divine self, it's not possible. The divine self can never be afraid. Isn't afraid. Yeah.
I want to unpack the ego.
All right.
So, okay. So, people perceive success, and success. So this is this is what I'm grappling with at the moment. I get sort of frustrated and angry with all these success coaches and make money and be successful. And so success is defined through money, through how many listeners, clients, fans you have, through how many people are looking at you and saying, "You're good." Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like maybe that's an egoic idea of success, something that I and most of us buy into, you know what I mean? And even though I've got the knowledge of that success is living outside of fear, living your divine self in that place of bliss, in that place of knowing, in that place of, and it doesn't require people looking at you saying, "You're fantastic, you're doing well, you're making money, you're slim, you're beautiful, you're famous, there's like unpacking the ego would be letting go of ideas of success in a way that money is going to make me successful.
Well, it's an old teaching. You're right.
I still struggling with embodying it because money has been my issue. I'm doing this work and I will do it to the day I die. And if people pay me or not, that doesn't matter because I'm doing it. But But then I wake up one day and I've got no money in the bank, and I think, oh, I should actually get out there and make some money. And what does that look like? I've got to tell people how good I am. I've got to appear to be successful in some way. There's, like, in order to attract people to you, it's sort of really tied up in a whole lot of ego. I don't know.
If you go there, if that's what you agree to, and if that's what you believe you have to do to get what you want, it will be. Because, that's not been my experience with this work.
No.
But it was no, not with this work. This work I show up for, and I offer it up. And I do show up, and I'll do the business that I need to do. I'll show up at the events I'm supposed to be at, and I'll make the plane reservations and things like that. But I'm not invested in the way that I actually used to be around stuff. I also think that this stuff came to me. I'm 53 years old now. And I was actually told and when I was in my early 30s and I was revved up and like, oh, I'm special and I can do these things and what about me? Somebody said to me, a couple of mediums independently said, one of them said, you're going to have a big career change in your late 40s and early 50s. You really need to take it. You live longer. And somebody else said to me, your work has been veiled until your late 40s or 50, because that's the time that it's right for you to be present for this. And, I Am the Word was published when I was, I think, 48, 49, 4 years ago. I'm 53 now. I'll be honest, I think had this happened 10 years ago, I would have been on an ego. I don't know, I would have been too scared. I was too busy hiding. It doesn't matter, but you brought up some very important things. Because, the old Christian teaching, truthfully, which my guides utilize and they unpack it differently, but it's, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. All that is, in their opinion, is the awareness of the divine in all things. That's the kingdom. And all things will be added because you have to know the source of your stuff. Now, if I think that my job is the source of my income, or my partner is the source of my being loved, if I had one, or if my home is the source of my security, I'm essentially, I'm going to say it, almost sort of creating false gods, because when the job goes away, do I have income? If the home goes away, am I protected? If the partner goes away, am I still loved? And my guides, I think, would say, and not just them, I think this is sort of old metaphysics, truthfully, is we have to begin to realize what the source is. And that the channels can change, but that the source is what we're aligning to. And I don't know that that means that we're passive to it. I think we show up. The teaching, the thing that you're bringing up, which I think is very important, and I'm glad to hear it, is, even in the New Age, or what we can call the New Age, there's a big emphasis on creating stuff, and, manifesting stuff. And my guides say, there's nothing wrong with living in the house on the hill. Somebody gets to live there. But ask yourself why you want it. Because if why you want it is because that's what it means to be successful, or you're going to be the envy of your neighbors, or you're going to make your sister jealous, or something like that, you're creating in fear. And my guides have a very simple teaching, which I like. And this one I'm really good with. I really work with this one. They say, the action of fear is to create more fear. And that every choice you make, because you're frightened, calls more fear to you. And they say, look at your life, look at every choice you ever made because you were afraid, and see what it got you. It's probably more fear.
I've got a fantastic example of that. That's just so key. I was living in a house I was being evicted from because I decorated it and they wanted to put up the rent and I was fighting them, so I was scared. And then, so I was in fear. And then I moved in with an ex-employee of mine who was going to move out of her house because she'd had boyfriend troubles and I was going to take on her lease. So I moved in with her and she became spastic and ended up locking myself and my young daughter out of the house and packing up all my furniture and shipping it off because she was kind of spastic. But as I sat in my brother's back room, this happened in my 30s, I created in fear. I moved into her house because I feared that I wouldn't be able to get another house because I was a single mom and I didn't have a lot of income. And so I thought, well, I can take on your lead. Everything I did out of fear. And it just expanded. It just got worse until I found myself with a suitcase and my daughter living in the back room of my brother's house in a single bed. The two of us living in this single bed for about 2 weeks because this woman had this spaz attack. But I created it all out of fear. It was all fear-based decisions that had me there. And yeah, that's so key. That's so key.
It's an easy barometer sometimes. And if I think that I have to play by the rules to get my needs met, that's okay. But you're then sort of adhering to the laws of culture. This is popular. This is what you can do. This is what you need to be successful. Somebody once said that these are the things you need to do to be successful, and everybody goes, okay, and this is what we do. But I don't know that that's necessarily following, I would almost want to say, spiritual law. I think, I read for a lot of people who are trying to get ahead as if this is a business. And there is business attached to the work. We have the right to be, clothed and fed. But truthfully, if I approach this at the cost of forgetting spiritual truth, I might as well be selling shoes someplace. Do you know what I mean? And I'm better at this because I do feel that I've been supported by my guides or whoever in this. I'm shocked, truthfully. I'm really at the point where I'm considering letting go of one of my academic appointments after having had it for 25 years to allow me to be on the road more for the work. And that job was my sense of security and identity, and nobody had to know I was a psychic and I could just show up and do my stuff and have a normal life. And my attachment to who I thought I was may not be as needed anymore. So I get to ask this question of myself now. Am I holding on to something out of fear, or am I holding on to something because it still brings me things that are valuable? Like, I really love teaching. I'm a good teacher. It's a fun thing for me.
So what's the answer?
I don't know yet.
Yes, you do.
But I don't. I'm still with it. And I feel like when I respond to this, it's going to be a big deal for me because I had this job since I was, 25, 26 years old. It's been a big part of my life. It's like any relationship. That's all.
True. Change is always challenging. But, you said I'm a teacher. I love teaching. But, Paul, you're still a teacher and you're still, your work is teaching.
It is.
Look, I have to say something to you.
Sure.
You say, and you've said a few times today, I'm not the teacher. I'm just the guy that sits in the chair. And my guides actually said to me when I was exploring channeling years ago, do I call myself a channel because I communicate with you, or do I just call myself me? My website used to be called Blissful Beings. It used to be named after them. And then I shifted it to me because this is what they said to me. Not that I'm Jesus, but we're all the Christed energy. He never said he was channeling God. He said he was, was an extension of that energy. Yep. And then they said, it's your choice. It's your choice, And I thought, yeah. But being a teacher doesn't mean that you can't still be fallible, because that's how, we learn.
Well, no, I'm still a teacher. When I'm channeling, when I'm doing that work, I'm allowing the information to come through me. It may actually be information that I'm personally in disagreement with.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the books, I mean, I'm interrupting every few pages saying, what the hell are you talking about? This doesn't feel quite right. And then they have to unpack it. And that's been the way the books have come through, because the books can't be edited, but I'm uncomfortable bringing through a teaching that doesn't feel true to me. So I inquire and they have to explain it. And then I'm going, okay, I get it now.
Yeah. Well, I was reading last night that you started a paragraph, or you were, a paragraph start, and then coming through you, they said, we're going to start this again because Paul's in the way. He's interfering with the transmission. So we're going to say to you, Paul, get out of the way. And then we're going to start this paragraph again. And I just laughed. I'm like, I laughed as I was reading that.
In the new book too. I mean, and it's awful when that happens for me. I get very frightened because, there's a book expected of me, and I go, because the deal has been that I can't edit it and change it, if the guides say it, it winds up in the book.
Yeah.
The only things that are cut are those things that are interruptions. When I say, I can't do this, it doesn't make sense, and the woman who's on the phone with me through the channeling says, Paul, relax, it's fine, just go back, sit in the chair and calm down, and let's start. But those things are listed in the books as interruptions. I don't cut the stuff that I'm not comfortable with. I don't know, but as to being the teacher, I am a teacher. My guides really teach the workshops that I am there for. So, and I do make a bit of a distinction between them and me. If they are the highest part of me, if they are something that I'm linked into at a much higher level, and that's possible, I'm great with that. But what I don't get to do is develop the same kinds of relationships I have, because the Paul person, with say a class, because the Paul personality is receded through the channeling. So I come out during the breaks, or I come out for psychic reading stuff, and I'm very present and I enjoy that. I get to be me a bit more. But, I do know of other channels who said, this is going to come as me or else, and that's how the information comes, and I respect that. It's quite possible. See, I think when you talked about Jesus, I think Jesus was speaking as the Christ. He was assumed at that level, or anyone who has really ascended in consciousness, the Buddha, whoever you want to say, they speak as truth. And at that level,
but
I think...
They still have a personality. They still have a human
personality. But here's but yes, they do. But I think that the personality is relegated to a very, this is my understanding from the guides' teachings, and I'm still grappling with this one, believe me, that the personality is relegated to a different place. It is no longer running the show. And the guides talk about the difference between personality, which they say is a construct.
Yes.
It's made up of history, it's made up of what we've been taught, and character, which they say is essential to us and informs personality but is not. And the character can survive. Personality really doesn't in the same way. I think that, it's not even about subjugating the personality, it's about being the true self. And the true self isn't operating in fear, isn't operating with an agenda, isn't trying to get all his needs met in whatever way he can or she can. That's the small stuff. The true self, I think, which is who my guides would say who we truly are, is available for a vastly different experience of being. And that's what they're teaching through me, and I'm just showing up for it, I'll tell you. That's all I know how to do.
Well, my definition of the true self would be, centered in love, and centered in service. I mean, centered in wanting to give and not needing to get. Because you don't need to get when there's nothing to get. You're only, when there's nothing to get because you have it all, then you're centered in giving. And often I'm there and often I'm not. I'm often in giving, and then sometimes I think, I'm doing all this giving, what am I getting? I'm back in personality. Where is it for me? Where's me? But I want to ask you something about the Christ, because in the book, the Christ is used a lot. The Christ can be born in man is something that the guides say. How would you or they define the Christ?
It's their definition has been in every book. They say the same thing. They say that the Christ is the aspect of the Creator that can be realized in material form. So it's the divine as you. It's the divine truth operating as and through you in realization. And that the expression of that true self, they would say, is how you serve. But they would say that all men, all women, all beings have been seeded with this. This is who we truly are. It's the essential self. It's the self that was first, the first created self, if you wish. That's the truth of who you are. So that's what they would call the Christ. Now, the coming into an awareness of that, not as an ideology or even as an aspiration, but as a vibration and a level of consciousness that can be aligned to, is what they're teaching. So it's not a convenient teaching. It's really not. And the guides say, we don't write self-help books. And what they say sort of about this, or has been said, I don't remember how it came out, but self-help books are for the small self that want to improve. The divine self is great. So it's about learning to be as the divine self. And you don't do that through an act of will. You do that through alignment and engagement, because the divine self knows better than I do what I need to be expressed as.
I want to establish that distinction, because that was beautiful. Self-help books are for the small self. Your book or what would you call your book? Books like your book are for the establishment of the divine self, which doesn't need help.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. That's a pearl. That's an absolute pearl. That's a great reminder. I don't need help when I am inside my divine self.
Or you have access to help, but it's the right help, to support you in your evolution. I mean, that's, we're here to learn. I hear that again and again and again,
I could talk to you all day. It's been such a joy, such a blessing, such a joy. But just getting back to the Christ, I only say that because I was brought up not religious at all.
Me too, yeah.
And my parents, my mum's advice to me about religion was I was expelled from a couple of schools because I was naughty. And I went to a convent. They took me in. I wasn't Catholic. And I said to Mum, what am I going to do about all this religious stuff, Mum? She said, just ignore it, darling. That was my spiritual advice when I was young. And so the whole Jesus thing I saw as God botherers, as Bible bashers, and it just seems to be, this Jesus loves me, Jesus. But yet, and so I sort of left it alone. I pursued my spiritual and psychic abilities, but sort of left the whole Jesus thing behind. But the guy just keeps coming to me, talking to me, and my ego doesn't allow it, because I've got this concept of Jesus being, what the sort of Bible Belt presents, and so reading in your book, The Christ Itself, and you say everyone on the planet, what about the Buddhists and the Hindus? And
it's not a religion. The Christ isn't a religious concept.
Okay.
It's the monad, or the divine spark. I think there's probably a name for it in every religion. My guides use the language to transmit the information to people in a culture. But you can have the same concept, without the trappings of religion. So I think that's the first thing. It's not exclusive. I mean, I think that when they're talking about the Christ itself, they're not talking about Jesus, the teacher, and the one who, the religions are speaking about. I don't think that they're excluding it, but I think that they're talking about who we are at an essence level. Everybody is. Now, I was raised to believe that people who believed in this stuff were stupid. People who prayed were really stupid. And it was a nice, smug, sort of New York upbringing. I think I went to church twice. I had a very quick stretch in a parochial school as well, and only because it was a cheap school. And I lasted there for a very short period of time before we moved. And I didn't recognize anything about the religious stuff. You just had to sit through it, and I didn't care. But I do feel that in some ways I had a very deep hunger for a spiritual life, but I would not have been able to identify it because I didn't know, it wasn't on the menu for me, you know. But I also didn't come in when I began to open to this stuff with tremendous prejudice because I was open to the possibility. When you go from living in a world where there is no spirit at all, and it cannot be, to one where you're getting some kind of evidence that there must be, whether it's seeing lights or feeling energy or channeling or even just knowing in your own heart that there's more to this than perhaps we've been told, everything changes. Everything changes. And then, you know, the journey begins. And the only journey that's required is the willingness to go where we've been told maybe we shouldn't and we don't have the right to. You know, if the divine is in all men and all women, we're all worthy. We are all worthy of a relationship with the divine, like it or not, even when we don't think so. That's what the guides would say. You know, this is true even when you don't believe it. This is who you are even when you deny it. It cannot be anything other than the truth. You know, the divine is seated in everything, in everyone. Even the folks we don't like, and that's probably a whole other interview because they talk a lot about that, you know. Yeah.
Well, I think being worthy of a relationship with the divine is a beautiful thing, but being worthy of, you know, being able to meet your needs as well, meet your desires or meet your wants, that's...
You can't exclude them. Yeah. That's the thing. You see, if you're excluding them, then you're making the world, the material realm, the answer to the problems, as opposed to realizing that everything is in vibration, everything is in consciousness, and how you're vibrating calls to you what you believe that you can hold, which is a lot about what the book is teaching.
So I'm getting, want money? Remember love. Want health? Remember love. Want love? Remember love. Want a new house? Remember love. Want a new car? Remember love. Just like keep bringing it back to outside of, like, just remember, like, bring it back to within.
Yeah, and recognize whatever you claim the source to be, and love is a wonderful word.
Yeah,
and
whatever you claim the source
way of understanding. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been
Thank you for having me.
Really beautiful to talk with you today. It's been really gorgeous. And if people want to find out more about Paul, go to Paul's website, paulselig.com, paulselig.com, and you'll see the books there. I'm excited about the new book. When does the new book come out? August?
And no, it comes out in January 5th.
Okay, so we've got a little while. Well, your journey between then and now will be an interesting one. Love to chat to you about that and the new book next year. That would be fantastic, because it sounds like no more the translator, more interaction for you, more living the work. So that's a wonderful ride. It's always beautiful to hear how other people do it, because in your story, in your journey, we learn. Yeah. So
thank you.
So it's been beautiful to talk with you today.
And you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Isn't Paul wonderful? Oh, what a great conversation. If you'd like to know more about me and learning how to be a conscious creator and learn about my guides and what I'm teaching, go to KarenSwain.com. You can book sessions there to chat to my guides, or you can go and book a session with Paul. We're all out there to serve each other and to help each other. And also you can go to KarenSwain.com and listen to fascinating people that I've spoken to over the last 4 years on radio and on YouTube. Just hit the radio button on the menu bar. Thanks again for joining me for another show. I look forward to serving you again next time. Bye for now.
Clap along if you know what happiness is. Clap along if you feel like that's